Broken hand or broken brain? What's your excuse today, black girl? I'm doing my best, Mr. Hollister. Your best is pathetic. That's why black women like you carry plates instead of finishing nursing school. I gave you a job when every restaurant looked at your black face and said no. This is how you repay me? Bridget Sullivan stood frozen, broken hand in a dirty cast, 3-kilogram tray trembling on her good arm. I'm sorry, sir. Move your black ass to table 7, now. She walked away. No tears, no protest, still working. In the corner booth, a man in faded jeans watched everything. He owned this restaurant. No one knew his face. Jonathan Mercer had come because of an anonymous letter, $52,000 missing. He would ask her later why she kept working with a broken hand. Her answer would keep him awake all night. 3 days earlier, Jonathan Mercer stood at his office window in Portland, watching the morning fog roll across the harbor. At 62, he'd built a small empire, one upscale restaurant that had grown into a reputation, a legacy. Harbor View Grill wasn't just a business. It was the last thing his wife Margaret had helped him create before cancer took her 3 years ago. The notification sound from his laptop broke the silence. 2:35 a.m., the timestamp read. Jonathan frowned. He hadn't been sleeping well anyway, hadn't slept well since Margaret passed, but emails at this hour were unusual. He walked to his desk, coffee cup in hand, and clicked on the message. No sender name, no subject line, just an attachment. A photograph, slightly blurred, of what looked like a handwritten ledger. Rows of numbers in neat columns, dates on the left side, and beneath it, a single line of text. $52,000 in 8 months. Ask your manager where it went. Jonathan stared at the screen. His first instinct was to delete it. Anonymous accusations were rarely worth the trouble, usually just noise from someone with a grudge. But something about the handwriting in the photograph made him pause. It was small, precise, desperate. Someone had taken a real risk to send this. He picked up his phone and called his accountant. The man answered on the 5th ring, voice thick with sleep. Mr. Mercer, it's almost 3 in the morning. I need the tip reports from Harborview for the last 8 months. Everything Ray submitted. At this hour? At this hour. The files arrived by 5 a.m. Jonathan spread them across his desk, cross-referencing the numbers with the photograph. According to Ray Hollister, his general manager of 7 years, tip income had averaged $6,500 per month. Reasonable for a restaurant of Harborview's size and clientele. But the anonymous letter claimed the real number was 40% higher. Jonathan leaned back in his chair. The math didn't lie. If the letter was accurate, someone had been skimming over $52,000 in 8 months. $52,000 that should have gone to servers, busboys, bartenders, the people who actually earned it. He pulled up the employee turnover report next. His stomach tightened. 14 people had quit in that period. All of them listed personal reasons as their explanation. No exit interviews, no complaints filed, no red flags raised. 14 people, and not a single one had said a word. That silence bothered Jonathan more than the money. In his experience, people didn't stay quiet when they were being treated well. They stayed quiet when they were afraid. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. Margaret, on opening day 15 years ago, holding the scissors for the ribbon cutting. Her smile was radiant, full of hope. She'd worn that same smile when she told him, the night before they opened, "This restaurant will succeed because we treat our people like family. Promise me you'll never forget that. If you ever start to forget, remember tonight." Jonathan looked at the photograph for a long moment. His throat tightened. He'd forgotten. After Margaret died, he'd handed the reins to Ray and stepped back. Grief had made him absent. Trust had made him blind. He'd told himself that Ray was capable, that the business was in good hands, that he needed time to heal. 3 years. How many people had been hurt in 3 years while he was healing? He stood up, walked to his closet, and pulled out an old duffel bag, the one he used to take on fishing trips with Margaret, back when life was simpler. By 6 a.m., he was on the road to Harborview. He didn't call ahead, didn't warn anyone. He checked into a cheap motel 2 miles from the restaurant, changed into clothes he hadn't worn in years, jeans, a plain t-shirt, scuffed work boots, and looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He looked tired, older than he remembered, nothing like the polished businessman in the company headshots that hung in Harborview's lobby. Good. That was the point. The next morning, Jonathan walked to the back entrance of Harborview Grill, the one employees used, behind the dumpsters where deliveries came in. A young assistant manager was smoking a cigarette, scrolling through his phone. "I'm looking for work," Jonathan said, keeping his voice flat, unremarkable. "Anything you've got. Dishwasher, busboy, whatever." The assistant manager looked him up and down, the gray hair, the calloused hands, the clothes that had seen better days. "You got experience?" "Enough. We're short-staffed." The young man shrugged, flicking ash onto the pavement. "Always short-staffed lately. Come back tomorrow at 6. We'll try you out in the kitchen." Jonathan nodded and walked away without another word. He didn't know what he'd find, but he knew one thing. If something was rotten in this place, he would see it with his own eyes. And if the letter was right, if someone had been stealing from his employees while he looked the other way, he would make it right, no matter what it cost. The next evening, Jonathan Mercer walked through the front door of Harborview Grill as a customer. He wore a collared shirt, nicer than his undercover clothes, but nothing flashy. Just another diner looking for a good meal. The hostess smiled professionally and seated him at a corner booth, the one with the worst view of the harbor, usually reserved for walk-ins without reservations. Perfect. From here, he could see the entire floor. The restaurant was beautiful, exactly as Margaret had designed it. White tablecloths, soft amber lighting, exposed brick walls lined with maritime photographs. The subtle aroma of garlic and butter drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the salt air scent piped through the ventilation system. On the surface, everything looked exactly as it should. Then he saw her. A waitress in her late 20s, brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, moving between tables with practiced efficiency. She carried a heavy tray of seafood platters, lobster, crab legs, oysters on ice, balanced expertly on one hand. Her other arm was wrapped in a white cast from wrist to elbow, tucked close to her body, partially hidden by her long black apron. She set the tray down at a foretop near the window, distributed the plates with smooth precision, and smiled at the customers as she rattled off the specials. When she turned to walk away, Jonathan noticed the slight tremor in her good hand, the way she shifted her weight, favoring her right side. The almost imperceptible wince when she lifted the empty tray. She was in pain. Real pain. And she was hiding it. A few minutes later, she approached his table. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth. She looked exhausted. Not the normal tired of a long shift, but the bone-deep weariness of someone running on fumes. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Harborview." Her voice was steady, professional. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Her name tag read, Bridget. "Just water for now," Jonathan said. "Thank you." She nodded and turned to leave, but the weight of the water pitcher made her stumble slightly. A few drops splashed onto the white tablecloth, spreading into small, dark circles. "I'm so sorry," she started, reaching for a napkin with her good hand. "It's fine," Jonathan said quickly. "Really, don't worry about it." Before Bridget could respond, a voice cut through the ambient noise of the dining room. "Bridget, a word." A man in a perfectly pressed charcoal suit emerged from the kitchen area, mid-40s, slicked back hair, a smile that showed too many teeth but never quite reached his eyes. Ray Hollister. Jonathan recognized him instantly from their video calls, but Ray had never met him in person. They'd only communicated through screens and spreadsheets. Ray's hand landed on Bridget's shoulder, not gently, but with the weight of ownership. He turned to Jonathan, smile widening. "Best waitress we have," Ray said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Dedicated beyond belief, showed up with a broken hand and still insisted on working. That's the Harborview spirit right there." He squeezed Bridget's shoulder. She didn't react, but Jonathan saw her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I'll check on your order, sir," Bridget said quietly, and walked toward the kitchen without looking back. Ray followed her. Jonathan waited 30 seconds, then stood up and walked toward the restrooms, which happened to be located near the kitchen entrance. A convenient coincidence. Through the swinging door's small window, he could hear Ray's voice. The smooth charm was gone, replaced by something cold and sharp. "Table 7 has been waiting 9 minutes. 9. You think that's acceptable?" "I'm doing my best. Your best isn't good enough." Ray's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "I don't care if your arm falls off. You get that food out. Don't make me regret not firing you last week." Silence. Then footsteps. Jonathan stepped back just as the kitchen door swung open. Bridget walked out, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. No tears. Her jaw was set, her back straight. She moved past Jonathan without seeing him, paused at the service station, and reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small notebook, spiral-bound, barely larger than her palm, and scribbled something quickly. Numbers, it looked like. Then she tucked the notebook away, composed her face into professional neutrality, and walked back to the floor. Jonathan returned to his table, but his appetite was gone. The notebook. The cast. The manager who smiled at customers and threatened employees behind closed doors. The pieces were starting to form a picture he didn't like. When Bridget returned with his water, Jonathan studied her face more carefully. She was tired, desperately tired. But there was something else in her eyes. Something that looked like defiance. Like she was fighting a war no one else could see. "Long shift?" he asked gently. She hesitated. Waitresses weren't supposed to complain. It was an unwritten rule. "It's fine," she said, forcing a small smile. "Thank you for asking." She walked away before he could say anything else. Jonathan watched her work for the next 2 hours, watched her carry trays that should have required 2 hands, watched Ray smile and laugh with VIP customers while ignoring the pain on Bridget's face, watched her pull out that little notebook 4 more times, always when she thought no one was looking. "What are you writing?" he wondered. "And why are you hiding it?" That night, Jonathan sat in his motel room, the anonymous letter spread on the bed beside him. The handwriting was small, careful, slightly shaky, like someone writing quickly, afraid of being caught. He thought about Bridget's notebook, the way she hid it in her apron, the precision of her movements. Even writing in secret, she was methodical, deliberate. Could she be the one who sent this? He pulled up his laptop and opened the employee files his HR director had sent over. Bridget Sullivan, 29 years old, 2 years of nursing school before dropping out due to debt. Hired at Harborview 14 months ago. No complaints filed, no disciplinary actions. Performance reviews consistently marked exceeds expectations. No record of her injury either. No workers' comp claim. No request for modified duties or reduced hours. She'd broken her hand and kept working like nothing had happened. Like she couldn't afford to stop. Jonathan closed the laptop. His reflection stared back at him from the dark screen. An old man in a cheap motel room, 4 hours from home, chasing shadows based on an anonymous letter. What am I doing here? The answer came immediately, rising from somewhere deep in his chest. He was doing what he should have done 3 years ago. He was paying attention. The next morning, Jonathan showed up at the back entrance of Harborview at 5:45 a.m. The same assistant manager was there, this time with a clipboard and a stained coffee cup. "You're early. Good." The young man barely looked up. "We need someone on dish duty. $8 an hour, no benefits, cash at the end of each shift. No questions asked." You in?" "I'm in." They handed him a threadbare apron and pointed him toward the industrial kitchen. For the next 3 days, Jonathan Mercer, owner of Harborview Grill, worth several $1,000,000 on paper, scrubbed pots, sorted silverware, and hauled trash bags twice his weight. His hands blistered on the first day. His back screamed by the second. He understood, for the first time in decades, what it actually meant to work at the bottom. And he watched. God, did he watch. He watched Ray collect tip money at the end of each shift, counting it privately in his locked office while the servers waited anxiously in the hallway. He watched the staff exchange nervous glances whenever Ray's footsteps echoed through the kitchen. He watched Bridget work 12-hour shifts with a broken hand, never complaining, never sitting down, never showing weakness. And he watched her write in that notebook. Every single night. Always when she thought no one was looking. Always hidden immediately afterward. On his second day, a young busboy named Tyler, 22, skinny as a rail, perpetually jumpy, sidled up to Jonathan at the dish station. His eyes darted toward Ray's office before he spoke. "You're new, right?" "Yeah, just started." Tyler glanced over his shoulder again, then leaned closer. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Word of advice. Don't ask questions. About tips, about schedules, about anything. Just take what they give you and say thank you. That's how it works here." "Why?" Tyler's face went pale. His hands trembled slightly. "Because that's how you survive." He walked away before Jonathan could respond, nearly knocking over a rack of clean glasses in his haste. "That's how you survive here." Jonathan turned those words over in his mind as he scrubbed another pot, the hot water turning his blistered hands raw. He thought about the 14 people who'd quit in 8 months, the ones who couldn't survive anymore. The ones who'd walked away with personal reasons and no exit interview. Had they tried to speak up? Had anyone listened? Or had they just disappeared? One by one, like they'd never existed at all. The dish pit at Harborview smelled like salt, old grease, and industrial-strength detergent. Jonathan's hands were cracked and bleeding by noon, but he kept working, kept his head down, kept his ears open. The kitchen staff talked freely when they thought no one important was listening. "Tips were garbage again last night," muttered a line cook named Eddie, slamming a pan onto the stove. $40 for an 8-hour shift, and the place was packed. I saw the reservation list." "Don't complain," warned another cook, a woman named Rosa. "You know what happened to Daniela." "Yeah, personal reasons." Eddie made exaggerated air quotes, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sure, personal reasons, just like all the others." Jonathan filed the name away. Daniela, another one of the 14, another ghost. At the end of the shift, he positioned himself near the hallway that led to Ray's office. He watched as Ray emerged with a small metal cash box, his expression businesslike, almost bored. The servers lined up like soldiers awaiting inspection. Bridget was among them, her cast visible beneath her rolled-up sleeve. "Tip pool for tonight, $320, Ray announced, his voice carrying no warmth. 8 of you on floor duty. That's 40 each. No one questioned it. No one asked to see the receipts or the credit card slips. They just took their money, crumpled 20s counted out with mechanical precision, and walked away. But Jonathan had been watching the floor all night. Table 12 alone had left a $100 bill on a $200 check. He'd seen the customer place it on the table with a smile, complimenting Bridget's service despite her obvious injury. One table, $100. And Ray was claiming the entire night's pool was only $320. The math didn't just fail to add up. It was insulting. Later, while Jonathan was cleaning the walk-in refrigerator, Tyler appeared with a stack of empty bus tubs. "Hey," Jonathan said casually. "Quick question. What did we actually clear in tips tonight?" Tyler's eyes went wide. He looked toward Ray's office like a rabbit spotting a hawk. $40, he whispered. "Same as always. That's what we get." I saw table 12 leave 100 just by itself. Tyler's face drained of color. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the tubs. "Don't," he hissed. "Please, just don't." "Don't what?" "Don't ask. Don't count. Don't notice." His voice cracked. "If you want to keep this job, if you want to work anywhere in this town, you don't see anything, understand?" He practically fled from the walk-in, leaving Jonathan alone among the hanging sides of beef and stacked produce boxes. $40 each, Jonathan thought grimly, on a night when the floor pulled at least 600. The skimming wasn't subtle, it wasn't even clever. It was systematic, brazen, and no one dared to say a word. Jonathan's second day brought darker revelations. During the lunch rush, he noticed Bridget working the floor again. Same cast, same exhaustion, same quiet determination. She moved slower today, her face paler. The pain was clearly catching up to her, but she didn't stop, didn't sit down, didn't ask for help. Around 2 p.m., the lunch crowd thinned, and Jonathan took his mandatory break by the back door. That's when he noticed Ray's office door standing slightly ajar. Inside, Ray was on a phone call, his back turned to the entrance, laughing at something the person on the other end had said. On the desk sat an open laptop, its screen glowing in the dim office light. Jonathan edged closer, pushing a mop bucket ahead of him as cover. The screen showed an Excel spreadsheet with 2 columns clearly labeled Reported and Actual. The Actual column was consistently, grotesquely, 40% higher than Reported. $52,000. The letter was right. Every word of it. Jonathan's grip tightened on the mop handle. He wanted to storm in there, slam the laptop shut, drag Ray out by his expensive tie. But he forced himself to pull back, to keep moving, to pretend he'd seen nothing. He needed more. He needed to understand the full scope. And he needed allies. That afternoon, a familiar face appeared at the back entrance. A man in his mid-20s, brown hair, tired eyes. He wasn't coming for a shift. He was heading straight for the employee lockers. "Daniel." One of the servers, Paula, spotted him and hurried over. "Didn't expect to see you back here. Just grabbing my stuff. Left some things in my locker when I quit." Daniel's voice was flat, emotionless. Didn't exactly have time for a proper goodbye. Jonathan moved closer, pretending to mop the same spot repeatedly. "How's the new job?" Paula asked. "Better. Anything's better than this place." Daniel glanced around the kitchen, his expression darkening. "Get out while you can, Paula. Seriously. He'll drain you dry and make you think it's your fault." Paula bit her lip, her eyes filling with uncertainty. "It's not that easy." "I know. Trust me, I know." Daniel zipped his backpack and slung it over his shoulder. "I stayed 3 years. You know what I got for 3 years of loyalty? A thank you card and a $20 gift card to a coffee shop that closed 6 months ago." He walked out without looking back, the door swinging shut behind him with a heavy thud. Jonathan stood frozen, the mop dripping dirty water onto his shoes. 3 years. Daniel had survived 3 years under Ray's management. 3 years of $40 nights and broken promises. And when he finally left, no one had asked him why. No one had listened to his story. He'd just vanished. Another name on a turnover report labeled personal reasons. The third day brought everything to a head. Jonathan arrived early and stayed late, watching, waiting, documenting everything he saw in his own mental ledger. Around 8 p.m., just as the dinner rush was winding down, Ray's voice cut through the kitchen noise. "Bridget, my office, now." The kitchen fell silent. Everyone knew what a summons to Ray's office meant. Bridget set down the tray she was carrying, smoothed her apron, and walked toward the back hallway without a word. Her face betrayed nothing, but Jonathan saw her good hand clench into a fist at her side. The office door closed, but the walls were thin, cheap construction that Ray had never bothered to upgrade, and Jonathan positioned himself just outside, mop in hand, pretending to clean the baseboards. I warned you once. Ray's voice came through, low and dangerous. I found your little notebook. I tore it up. And now I hear you're still asking questions. Still making people nervous. Bridget's response was measured, controlled. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. A drawer opened with a metallic screech, slammed shut. I've been running this place for 7 years. You think you're the first waitress who thought she could play detective? Who thought she could be a hero? Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Here's what's going to happen, Ray continued, his voice dropping even lower. You're going to stop writing, stop talking, stop whatever little crusade you think you're on. Or I'll put you on clopening shifts until you quit, just like the others. And if I don't? A pause. Then Ray laughed, a cold, hollow sound that made Jonathan's skin crawl. Then I'll make sure no restaurant in this city will touch you. I've got friends everywhere, Bridget. Health inspectors, hiring managers, people who owe me favors. Your nursing school debt means you can't afford to start over somewhere else. He paused. Don't test me. The door handle turned. Jonathan stepped back quickly, pushing his mop bucket around the corner. Bridget emerged from the office, walked past him without seeing him, and continued straight through the kitchen to the back exit. Her face was completely blank. Not angry, not scared, just empty. But Jonathan noticed something else. Her apron pocket, where she usually kept the notebook, was flat. Empty. Ray had taken it. Destroyed it. Just like he'd threatened. Jonathan wanted to follow her, but he forced himself to wait. Forced himself to finish his shift. Forced himself to clock out like nothing had happened. At 11 p.m., after the restaurant finally closed, Jonathan walked to the parking lot. Most of the cars were gone, but one remained. Bridget's old sedan, parked in the far corner under a broken streetlight. The dome light was on inside, and in its dim glow, Jonathan could see Bridget sitting behind the wheel, hunched over something in her lap. She was writing. In a new notebook. She didn't give up, Jonathan realized, a strange mix of admiration and heartbreak flooding through him. He destroyed her evidence, threatened her livelihood, and she's still fighting. He watched her for 10 minutes. 15. She didn't start the car, didn't drive away, just kept writing, page after page, her pen moving with furious determination. Finally, Jonathan made a decision. He couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't watch from the shadows while this woman fought alone. He walked toward her car. Bridget's head snapped up when Jonathan knocked on her window. Her hand flew to the door lock, her body tensing for flight. Wait, Jonathan said, keeping his voice low, non-threatening. I'm not here to cause trouble, please. She stared at him through the glass. The dishwasher, the new guy, the old man who asked too many questions. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her cheeks tear-stained, but her jaw was set with stubborn determination. Slowly, reluctantly, she lowered the window 2 inches. What do you want? I saw Ray tear up your notebook yesterday, Jonathan said. Through the wall. I heard everything. He paused. And I saw you start a new one tonight. Bridget's face went pale. Her hand moved instinctively to cover the notebook in her lap. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Jonathan hesitated, then took the plunge. I also think you're the one who sent an anonymous letter a few days ago. To the owner of this restaurant. Bridget stopped breathing. Her eyes went wide, then narrow, cycling through fear and suspicion in rapid succession. A letter, Jonathan continued carefully, with a photograph of a ledger and a number. $52,000. For a long, terrible moment, neither of them spoke. The parking lot was silent except for the distant rumble of highway traffic and the buzz of a dying fluorescent light somewhere nearby. Then, slowly, Bridget unlocked her door. Get in. Jonathan sat in the passenger seat of her car, surrounded by the smell of old upholstery and stale coffee. Fast food wrappers littered the back seat. A parking permit from some long-ago hospital rotation hung from the rearview mirror. "How did you know?" Bridget asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the letter?" The handwriting, small, careful, like someone writing in secret, afraid of being caught. He met her eyes, like someone who learned to document things precisely. Medical charting, maybe. Bridget let out a shaky breath. "I didn't know if he'd even read it. The owner, I mean. I've never met him. Nobody here has. Ray handles everything. He's the face of this place. For all I knew, the owner didn't care what happened to us." "Why didn't you sign it?" "Because if Ray found out I'd sent it, I'd be gone before anyone could investigate. Fired for some made-up reason. Blacklisted from every restaurant in the city." She laughed bitterly. "He's done it before. To better people than me." Jonathan nodded slowly. "But you made copies of your notebook." Bridget stared at him. "How did you... You were in nursing school. You know how documentation works, how evidence works. No one keeps records that detailed without a backup." For a moment, Bridget didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached under her seat and pulled out a manila folder, thick, worn at the edges, stuffed with photocopied pages. "I made copies every week," she said quietly. "Kept them in my car. Ray never knew." Jonathan took the folder. His hands trembled as he opened it. Each page was meticulous. Dates, table numbers, customer totals, tips received versus tips reported. Night after night, for 8 months, Bridget had tracked every discrepancy with clinical precision. The total at the bottom of the last page, $52,000. "This is incredible," Jonathan breathed. "It's evidence," Bridget said flatly. "I was 2 years into nursing school before I had to drop out. I know how to chart, I know how to document. Every number in there I can swear to under oath." "Why?" Jonathan looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "Why go through all this? The risk, the fear, the broken hand? You could have quit, found another job, walked away." Bridget met his gaze. Her eyes were exhausted, but beneath the exhaustion, something burned, fierce and unbreakable. "You think I'm here for the money? For myself?" She shook her head slowly. "I'm here because 11 other people are still inside that building. 11 people who are too scared to say anything, too broke to quit, too beaten down to fight back." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion she'd been holding back for months. "If I leave, who will be the witness? Who will remember what happened to them?" Jonathan couldn't speak. The words hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. He thought about the 14 who'd already left. The personal reasons on their exit forms. The gift cards to closed coffee shops. The silence that swallowed them whole. Bridget had stayed. While everyone else ran, while everyone else gave up, while her own hand was broken and her job was threatened, she had stayed. Not for herself. For them. "Thank you," Jonathan said finally, his voice rough, "for sending the letter." Bridget frowned. "You still haven't told me who you are." Jonathan hesitated. He could tell her now. End the mystery right here. But something held him back. He needed time to think, to process, to plan. "Someone who needed to see this for himself," he said. "I'll be in touch. Soon." He stepped out of the car and walked back toward the motel, the folder tucked under his arm, her words echoing in his head. "If I leave, who will be the witness?" Back at the motel, Jonathan lay on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The folder of evidence sat open beside him, 52 pages spread across the comforter like pieces of a damning puzzle. 12:30 a.m. Sleep wouldn't come. "If I leave, who will be the witness?" He kept hearing her voice, kept seeing her face. Exhausted but unbroken. She'd stayed when everyone else left. She'd documented crimes when everyone else looked away. She'd risked everything for people who would never know what she'd done for them. And what had he done? He'd signed checks and read reports and trusted the wrong person for 7 years. 2:00 a.m. Jonathan opened his wallet and pulled out Margaret's photograph. Opening day. That radiant smile. The scissors in her hand. Promise me you'll never forget. If you ever start to forget, remember tonight. He'd forgotten. For 3 years he'd forgotten. And his people had paid the price. 4:35 a.m. Jonathan stood up, bones aching, eyes burning. He hadn't slept a single minute. He picked up his phone. "This is Jonathan Mercer. I need a complete backup of Ray Hollister's laptop. Every file, every folder, every hidden spreadsheet. Before 9 a.m. And don't tell anyone, especially not Ray." He hung up and dialed again. "Get your team ready. We're going to need documentation for a termination, and possibly a criminal referral." The sun was rising over the parking lot when he finally set down his phone. His body was exhausted, but his mind was razor sharp. He knew exactly what he was going to do. 7:00 a.m. Bridget Sullivan arrived at Harborview Grill early, as she did every day. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just her old sedan and a black SUV she didn't recognize parked near the employee entrance. She was reaching for the back door when a voice stopped her. "Bridget!" She spun around. The dishwasher, the old man from last night, stood a few feet away. But something was different. He was wearing a tailored suit now, charcoal gray, perfectly fitted. His posture had changed. He held himself like someone used to being in charge. "Who are you?" Bridget asked, her hand frozen on the door handle. Jonathan stepped closer. The morning light caught the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes. "Last night you asked who would be the witness, who would remember." He paused. "I've been remembering all night. I didn't sleep." "What are you talking about?" "You sent that letter because you hoped the owner would care. You didn't know if he would. You'd never even met him." Jonathan extended his hand. "My name is Jonathan Mercer. I own this restaurant. And you don't have to be a witness alone anymore." Bridget didn't move. Her face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, understanding. Her eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for months. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know if anyone would come." "I came," Jonathan said quietly, "and I'm sorry it took so long." 9:00 a.m. The staff meeting. Every employee at Harborview had been summoned, an unusual occurrence that had the kitchen buzzing with nervous speculation. They filed into the private dining room and took seats in folding chairs arranged in neat rows. Ray Hollister stood at the front, clipboard in hand, projecting the easy confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. He smiled at the assembled staff, his teeth too white, his eyes too cold. "Good morning, everyone. I know you're wondering why." The door opened, and Jonathan Mercer walked in. Ray's smile froze. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly before he forced his expression back to neutral. "Mr. Mercer." He recovered quickly, smoothly. "This is certainly a surprise. I wasn't informed you were visiting." "I know." Jonathan walked to the front of the room, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "That was intentional." And he set a thick folder on the table, Bridget's evidence. Then he opened a laptop and turned the screen toward the room. $52,000, Jonathan said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner. "That's the difference between what customers left in tips over the past 8 months and what employees actually received." A gasp rippled through the room. Tyler's face went white. Paula covered her mouth with her hand. Ray's composure cracked, but only for a second. "Those documents are fabricated. Anyone could have written those numbers." "Anyone?" Jonathan clicked through to the spreadsheet. Ray's own spreadsheet, backed up from his laptop that morning. 2 columns, reported and actual. Ray's handwriting in the margins, his initials at the bottom of each page. This is from your laptop, your files, your records. Jonathan looked at Ray steadily. Would you like to explain why there are 2 sets of books? The color drained from Ray's face. Sweat beaded on his forehead. I was going to pay it back, he stammered. It was temporary. The restaurant was struggling. I needed to cover some shortfalls. Harborview made $4 million in revenue last year, Jonathan interrupted. There were no shortfalls. There was just you, taking money from people who trusted you. He turned to face the staff. Their expressions ranged from shock to vindication to barely suppressed rage. I owe every one of you an apology, Jonathan said. I wasn't here. I trusted someone I shouldn't have, and I didn't ask the questions I should have asked. That failure is on me. He turned back to Ray, his voice hardening. You told me Bridget was dedicated. Those were your exact words. You were right. She was dedicated enough to document every lie you told for 8 months, while working with a broken hand, while you threatened to fire her. Ray's eyes darted to Bridget, standing by the door, his face contorted with fury. Security is waiting outside, Jonathan cut him off. You'll have a chance to explain yourself to the police, not to me, not anymore. 2 uniformed officers appeared in the doorway. Ray looked around the room desperately, at the employees who wouldn't meet his eyes, at the evidence spread across the table, at Jonathan's implacable expression. He had nowhere to go, nothing left to say. As the officers escorted him toward the door, Ray stopped in front of Bridget. His mouth opened, ready to unleash some final threat, some parting cruelty. She spoke first. You said heroes don't last long here. Her voice was quiet but steady, carrying clearly through the silent room. I'm still here. You're not. Ray's face went slack. The officers took his arms and led him away. The door closed behind him with a sound like finality. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then someone started clapping. Tyler. His face was still pale, but his hands came together once, twice, building into steady applause. Others joined in. Paula, Eddie, Rosa, the line cooks and busboys and servers who had suffered in silence for years. Bridget looked down, embarrassed by the attention. Jonathan walked over to her. You stayed when everyone else left, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. You didn't do it for money or recognition. You did it because it was right. That's rare, and I won't forget it. 1 week later, Harborview Grill held its first genuine staff meeting in years. The private dining room had been rearranged. The long rectangular table was gone, replaced with chairs arranged in a circle. No head of the table, no hierarchy of seating. Jonathan took a seat among the servers and cooks, deliberately positioning himself as one of the group rather than above it. Before we start, he said, looking around the circle, I want to address what happened and what's going to change. Not just personnel, the whole system. He pulled out a folder, this time filled with checks. The $52,000 that was stolen from you is being returned. Every server, busboy, and bartender who worked during those 8 months will receive their fair share. If you're not here anymore, we're tracking you down. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the room. Tyler leaned forward, his eyes wide. That's real? You're actually giving it back? It was always yours. Jonathan handed the first check to Bridget. You documented everything. You made this possible. Bridget took the check with trembling hands, but she didn't look at the amount. She looked at the people around her. Tyler, Paula, Eddie, Rosa, all the others she'd stayed to protect. It's not about the money, she said quietly. It never was. The door opened, and a familiar figure stepped into the room. Daniel, the former employee who'd told Paula to get out while you can. He stood in the doorway, uncertain, a backpack slung over one shoulder. I got a call, he said, his voice hesitant. "From Mr. Mercer. He said I should come." Jonathan stood up. "Daniel, you worked here for 3 years. You gave this place everything, and when you left, no one asked why. No one listened to what happened to you." He paused. "I'm listening now." Daniel's jaw tightened. Old pain flickered behind his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "They didn't listen. They never did. I want to change that." Jonathan gestured to an empty chair. "I'm not asking you to come back as a server. I'm asking you to come back as assistant manager. You know what this place was. Help me make it what it should be." The room held its breath. Daniel looked around, at the faces of former colleagues, at Bridget's steady gaze, at the checks being distributed around the circle. Finally, he nodded. "I thought when I quit, I lost," he said. "Turns out I was just waiting for the right person to speak up." He looked at Bridget. She looked back. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Two people who'd fought the same battle from different angles, finally standing on the same side. Jonathan turned to Bridget next. "I have something else. But first, I need to ask, will you stay?" Bridget blinked. "Stay?" "Not as a waitress. As floor supervisor. You'll manage front-of-house operations, scheduling, training, customer relations. You'll report directly to me. No middle managers, no gatekeepers. And you'll have full authority to address problems before they become crises. I don't have experience managing." "You have something better." Jonathan's voice was firm. "You have integrity. You're the only person in this building who didn't look away when things went wrong. That's not just anything. That's everything." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Inside lay a leather notebook, rich dark brown, supple and expensive, with gold lettering engraved on the cover. Bridget Sullivan, Harborview Grill. "Last time, Ray destroyed your notebook because he was afraid of what you'd written," Jonathan said. "This one has your name on it. Write whatever you want. Document whatever you see. And this time, everyone will read it." Bridget took the notebook with trembling hands. Her fingers traced the letters of her name. Real, permanent, acknowledged. "You know what I'm going to write first?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The names of everyone Ray forced out. 14 people. They deserve to be remembered." Jonathan nodded. "Then remember them. That's your first assignment." The next hour was spent laying out the new systems. Not rules imposed from above, but frameworks built together. Transparent tip pool. Every night, the full tip amount would be counted openly in front of all servers. No private offices. No trust me math. Everyone would see the total and verify their share. Open door policy. Any employee could email Jonathan directly. No gatekeepers, no retaliation. No going through managers who might have their own agendas. Mandatory exit interviews. No one would ever leave Harborview with just personal reasons again. If someone quit, management would find out why and document it. Anonymous feedback system. Like Bridget's letter, but official. A secure channel for employees to report problems without fear. Every submission reviewed monthly. "These aren't just policies," Jonathan said, looking around the circle. "They're promises. And if I break them, I expect you to hold me accountable. That's what this notebook is for." He gestured to Bridget. "She'll be watching, and so will all of you." After the meeting, the employees filed out slowly, many stopping to shake Jonathan's hand or exchange quiet words with Bridget. The atmosphere had shifted, still cautious but no longer afraid. Hopeful, maybe. For the first time in years. When the room was empty, Jonathan walked to Ray's old office. The desk had been cleared, the laptop confiscated as evidence, the personal effects boxed up and removed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Margaret's photograph. For a long moment, he just looked at it. Her smile, her eyes, the scissors in her hand, ready to cut the ribbon on their shared dream. He set the photograph on the empty desk, facing the door. "I forgot what you told me," he whispered. "But someone reminded me. I won't forget again." He stood there for a moment longer, alone with the memory of his wife. Then he straightened his jacket, walked out of the office, and rejoined his team. There was work to be done. 3 months later, Harborview Grill was transformed. The dining room looked the same on the surface. White tablecloths, amber lighting, the comforting smell of butter and garlic. But anyone who knew what to look for could see the differences. The servers smiled more. Real smiles, not the forced grimaces of people trying to survive. The kitchen staff laughed and joked during prep, their voices carrying through the pass-through window without fear. And Bridget Sullivan stood near the host stand, tablet in hand, watching the floor with quiet pride. Her cast was gone, had been gone for 2 months now. The bone had healed cleanly. She wore a new name tag, Bridget Sullivan, floor supervisor. A young server named Amanda, hired 3 weeks ago, was struggling with a complicated order at table 6. The customers had modifications on 4 different dishes, dietary restrictions, an allergy to shellfish. Amanda's hands were shaking, her face flushed with panic. In the old days, Ray would have descended on her like a vulture, berating her in front of everyone until she either quit or learned to hide her mistakes. Bridget walked over calmly, casually, like she was just passing by. "Hey, take a breath. What's the problem?" "Table 6. They want substitutions on everything, and there's an allergy, and I can't remember which dish has the cross-contamination risk." "It's okay." Bridget pulled out her notebook, the leather one with her name on it, and flipped to a page of quick reference notes she'd compiled. "Here, I made this for exactly this situation. Shellfish allergens, cross-contact risks, safe substitutions. Write it down first, then enter it in the system. You'll get faster with practice." Amanda exhaled shakily. "Thank you. I'm sorry, I should know this by now. Stop." Bridget's voice was firm but kind. "You'll make mistakes. Everyone does. I made mistakes when I started. The difference is how we handle them. Here you won't be punished for asking questions. You'll be helped." Amanda nodded, wiped her eyes, and returned to her table with renewed confidence. At 10 p.m., after the dinner rush wound down, the staff gathered in the break room for tip count. It was a ritual now. Transparent, communal, almost ceremonial. Bridget counted the bills and coins while everyone watched. No private offices, no closed doors. $680 tonight, she announced. 8 servers on floor duty. That's $85 each. Tyler, still there, no longer jumpy, finally starting to relax, counted his share carefully. $85. He looked up at Bridget with something like wonder. "That's more than I made in 3 days under Ray," he said quietly. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. It's real." Bridget handed him his money. "And it's yours. It was always supposed to be yours." Tyler nodded slowly. The fear that had lived in his eyes for so long was finally, truly gone. In its place was something new. Trust. The front door chimed and Jonathan Mercer walked in. He came by once a week now, not to inspect or manage, but to eat, to be present, to remind himself what Harborview was supposed to feel like. "Mr. Mercer," the hostess smiled warmly. "Your usual table?" "Please. Thank you, Carmen." He sat in the corner booth, the same one he'd occupied on his first night undercover, and watched the restaurant hum around him. The servers moved with confidence. The kitchen staff worked in harmony. The customers laughed and lingered over dessert, comfortable in a way they couldn't have articulated but definitely felt. Bridget approached his table a few minutes later, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Still checking up on us, boss?" "Not checking." Jonathan returned the smile. Just eating, and maybe remembering. Remembering what? Why I started this place. He paused, his expression softening. You reminded me, when I'd forgotten. Bridget's smile faded into something more serious. You came when no one else would. That's what I remember. We came for each other, Jonathan said. That's what this place was always supposed to be. Margaret knew that. I just lost sight of it for a while. Bridget nodded. Then she pulled out her notebook, well worn now, filled with 3 months of notes, ideas, observations, and names, and showed him the first page. 14 names. The people Ray had forced out. The ones who'd left with personal reasons and $20 gift cards. I tracked them all down, she said. 3 came back to work here. The rest, at least they know someone remembered. Someone cared enough to write their names down. Jonathan looked at the list. Some names he recognized from old HR files. Others were strangers, but each one represented a person who'd been hurt, and a promise that it wouldn't happen again. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For staying. When everyone else left, you stayed. Bridget tucked the notebook back into her apron and smiled. A real smile, unguarded and warm. Someone had to be the witness. I'm just glad I didn't have to be one alone. Late evening. The restaurant had closed an hour ago, but Bridget Sullivan was still there. She sat alone at a corner booth, the leather notebook open in front of her. The first page still held those 14 names, the people who'd been forced out, the ones she'd refused to let be forgotten. But tonight, she turned to a fresh page. She wrote slowly, deliberately, the pen moving across the paper with careful purpose. This notebook isn't for me anymore. It's for everyone who stayed silent because they thought no one was listening. I'm listening now. I'll keep listening, and I'll keep writing. She paused, reading the words back. For 8 months, she'd written in secret, documenting injustice in a little spiral notebook that Ray had torn to shreds. She'd kept going anyway. Not because she knew it would work, not because she was sure anyone would care, but because staying silent felt like a betrayal of everyone who couldn't speak for themselves. Now she was writing something different. Not just a record of wrongs, but a blueprint for what could be. Staff schedules, training protocols, ideas for making Harborview better, not just for her, but for everyone who came after. She closed the notebook and looked around the empty dining room. The chairs were upturned on tables, the floor freshly mopped, the lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. 3 months ago, this place had felt like a prison. Now it felt like hers. Not because she owned it, but because she'd helped save it. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. Bridget locked the front door, tucked the notebook under her arm, and walked to her car. She paused with her hand on the door handle. For so long, she'd asked herself, does anyone care? Is anyone paying attention? The answer, she'd learned, was yes. But sometimes you had to be the first one to speak up. Sometimes you had to stay when everyone else left. Sometimes you had to write things down, even when you were scared. Even when you didn't know if anyone would ever read them. Because silence had a cost, and someone had to be brave enough to break it. Have you ever seen something wrong and stayed silent? You don't need anyone's permission to speak up. Sometimes the first step is just writing it down, even if it's only for yourself. If this story made you think of someone, share it with them, not to judge, just to remind each other, silence has a price. And sometimes, the bravest person in the room is the one who refuses to walk away.